This is the top 5 RPGs for the Game Boy Advance. These are the games that I grew up with. These are some of the best games ever made. Let's start with number 5, Golden Sun by Camelot Software, released August 2001. Praise the sun! The Golden Sun. You are some brat from some village that so happens to have these psychotic powers. They can't even stop a rock. Regardless, you are on an epic quest to save the world. Big surprise. Something Pokemons, lighthouses, and quite possibly the best villain duo ever. They actually remind me a lot of Jesse and James from the Pokemon anime. This game in general is an excellent example of pushing the Game Boy Advance to its absolute limit. The overworld exploration is dense and filled with stories, puzzles, and a multitude of dungeons and their respective enemy inhabitants. In combat features faux 3D with awe-inspiring cinematography and particle effects, albeit it looks a bit rough and hasn't aged especially well. While it breaks down to a cliché story with rather poor writing and mindless dungeon crawling, there are points of absolute brilliance. Number 4, Fire Emblem, Intelligent Systems, April 2003. Political intrigue, fighting, death, destruction. Fire Emblem. Take on the roles of several characters and their war story. It's interesting to see so many points of view within the same overall narrative and time frame. Explore an overwhelming amount of backstory embedded in every single character. What a monumental feat. But we don't go to Fire Emblem for the story. Readings for nerds. We like to kill things and avoid being killed ourselves. But mostly that second part. This game is hard. Even on the easier difficulties, you'll have to restart more than once to save everyone. Just let that one character die, you say? Are you kidding? We're the heroes. No man left behind. That's my motto, trademark. Despite the absurd difficulty, the basics are fairly simple. That is, if you're able to memorize the rock, paper, scissors format. The part I especially like is the gorgeous 2D animations in the combat scenarios. I have literally never seen such smooth, wonderful animation. It is truly a wonderful sight. The story is awesome, the combat is awesome, and the animations are divine. What more could you possibly want on a portable game system? Number 3, Mega Man Battle Network 3, Capcom, December 2002. Hey, it's Jumpin' Shoot Man! No sir, no jumpin', but a hell lot of shooting. This entry may seem kinda like a curveball, but it's actually one of my favorite games of all time. It can be broken down into 3 parts. There's Overworld 1. This features a bunch of elementary students and their quest to save the world. Stop me if you've heard that one before. Overworld 2. This is a pseudo dungeon crawler, thin maze-like passages interconnected and filled with enemies to fight. And then finally, combat, the meat of the game. Essentially at a base level, you move around a grid, dodging enemy attacks and outputting your own. Your attacks work sort of like a card game. In other words, you have a deck with which to draw from. These cards contain abilities to use in battle. It's a phenomenally fresh, action-packed experience system that unfortunately has seen little to no use outside of the series. The general look and theme is both colorful and visually appealing. I am not a huge fan of the Mega Man license, but the developers did a fantastic job to make it feel at home, like they belonged. The reason I picked 3 in particular is primarily because of the style of the system. Basically, towards the middle of the game, the character's combat avatar changes based on how you've played up to that point. For example, if you use the Buster gun a lot, then the style change will reflect that in a super awesome Buster Shot upgrade. This leads to multiple playthroughs with different playstyles each time. The Mega Man Battle Network series burned hot and bright in the early 2000s, then promptly crashed and burned, never to be revived again. Number 2, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance by Square Enix in February 2003. Legitimately one of the best games ever made. I like this game significantly more than even the original. What makes it so great? Ugh, I can literally make a book on this masterpiece. Let's start by touching on the story. You're some kid who's just moved to this new area. In doing so, you have no friends and no confidence. Similarly low self-esteem is the pushover pansy named Mute. He's the subject of a lot of bullying. Rounding out these nobodies is Ritz, a warrior-spirited protector of the weak. Overnight, all these goofy characters are transported to the world of Final Fantasy. The rest of the game explores the themes of growing up and facing the cruelty of life as we know it, instead of simply running away, among other things. Surprisingly mature narrative along a whole heap of side quests keeps the midnight oil burning. The battling in itself is a bit less expansive than the narrative, but still pretty awesome in its own right. Scenarios generally play out as many other games have done. Strategically move units around and attack until the opposition is dead. Largely controversial is the addition of laws, constraints, or bonuses based on certain actions. For example, a character can get a yellow card for using a fire spell, whereas another unit can get a bonus for using an ice spell. Get enough yellow cards and go to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. The reason it's controversial is because it can be seen as simply an annoyance, getting in the way of the core gameplay. However, I am under the impression that it does well to make each battle feel and play differently. In addition to all that good stuff, there are dozens of jobs which to pick from dual-wielding greatsword paladins to battlefield-destroying summoners. And on the note of summoners, certain major events of the game allow the player to use these catastrophic abilities. Graphics are probably the least interesting out of everything. Don't get me wrong, the game in general still looks great, but it can get a bit dry in battlefield design, certain character designs, and regarding the overworld, but otherwise colorful and vibrant. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is spectacular in a multitude of ways, and I didn't even get into things like abilities being tied to gear, the phenomenal soundtrack, and the great writing. FFTA is the pinnacle of turn-based strategy games in every single way. Number 1, I think a lot of people are expecting this, Pokemon Emerald by Game Freak, September 2004. But King, using all these praises for FFTA, why isn't that one first? Simply put, Pokemon Emerald is indisputably a better game. But isn't the Pokemon franchise tired? True enough, but the Pokemon series has always stood out in my mind as a pioneer for video games in general to reach the mass market. It stretches beyond the medium in a way so few games do. The formula is simple: defeat all the gym leaders with Pokemon acquired on the adventure. In the process of meeting hundreds of unique creatures with their own set of abilities, traits, looks, and meet a similar repertoire of people: hikers, teens, cool dudes, professors, love interests, commanders, villains, swimmers, sailors. The world is so densely populated from people with all walks of life sharing this fascination with these cutesy but dangerous animals. True, the narrative is fairly weak, but we still do it without question. Why? Because everybody wants to be the best, our way. With our Pokemon that we caught, that we raised, that we command. Every playthrough is vastly different, or not at all. That's the beauty of the Pokemon series. It is what you make it. Aside from the cheesy nonsense, Emerald is just jam-packed with new things, like bike interactions, secret bases, double battles, battle tents, that allows you to draft Pokemon, puzzles, and even beauty pageant-esque competitions. And just to note, when I say Pokemon Emerald, I'm referring to this generation as a whole. So Ruby and Sapphire, they did come first, so they're technically the game, but you know, Emerald is just the summation of all of those. Pokemon is the series anyone from all ages can enjoy. It's an adventure, it's a story, it's a living world. It's Pokemon.